When did you realize you were an addict? Or when did you realize you were an alcoholic? That question is super frustrating on so many levels. I can assure you, if I was able to pinpoint the moment that I relinquished all of my control over to something that to anyone else was an innocuous object, or relinquish my power over to a bottle filled with a clear liquid that ruled my life. I don't know a date. I don't know a time, but I can tell you there was a moment. And that moment looks very different for people. That moment for me, and I'm just going to be as honest as possible. Um, that moment looked like children and youth services showing up to my house. Um, they had gotten reports of, my drinking, and I'm going to go into another video regarding, how my drug addiction and my alcoholism affected the lives and upbringing of my children and what that looks like for them today, because it is a hereditary disease. Whether or not you believe that, there's enough scientific evidence out there to attest to that statement, and I'd certainly love to discuss it in more detail in another video. But when children and youth service, and for those who don't know, they actually monitor situations where children may be considered in a high risk or unsafe environment. Certainly, if your mother is a addict and drinking on a daily basis to blackout point, that may not be a conducive environment for a healthy upbringing for a child. I didn't see it then. I was questioned. And when I say questioned, I mean the gambit. Everything. What time do they go to bed? What time do they eat? How do you discipline? Boom, 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 boom. Are you an alcoholic? Do you consider yourself to have a problem with substances? Are you willing to give us a urine? I mean, I feel that I was so smart. Most addicts we think we're smart. Don't be fooled. Trust me, at the end of the day, when we manage to stave off withdrawals another day, we're not sitting there saying, I'm pretty dumb. Let me be honest. We're not saying that. I answered everything right. I feel like I was very genuine, and I gave a very real approach. I felt like they were buying it. And they did. I did not get that urine that day. Though they told me they would be popping in throughout the next 30 days to monitor the situation. And if they saw nothing to be concerned about, my case would be closed. They decided to show up to my house on a Tuesday. I believe it may have been after 1 a.m. I'm being serious. This is Philly. After 1 a.m. I was still sitting on the downstairs steps because I was too intoxicated to have climbed them to go into my house. So I had come home from work in that state. And I believe that the little guys that I was responsible for were trying to get me upstairs but could not. So though I knew that I was in danger of losing my children, all I had to do was stay sober. I'd done all the other parts of it. The house was clean, kids had beds, food in the cabinet, refrigerator's good. They just, we're going to do a pop-up urine on you. And we just need make sure you're not an alcoholic and you don't have any substance abuse issues. I realized, because I didn't stop there. Let me just be honest. Again, I said it was a moment. There was no one particular day when I was like, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God, I'm cracky. No. In that moment, because it continued on. It was not daily all the time, but I probably go 3 days, skip a day. Nonetheless, within that 30 days, I can count on my hand how many times I was sober. I knew, etched in stone, I had a problem. I had arrived on what I had always been hearing about. Eventually, if you continue the way you're going, this is going to be problematic for you. I just didn't believe it. Sarah, Sarah, I will go on to tell you that that situation did not end well for me, nor did it end well for my children. I can tell you that the realization of whether or not you're an addict or an alcoholic does not come acutely. It's not something that you realize in the moment. It comes much, much later. And that's usually the sober up stage in jail. It's usually on the side of the highway after you've wrapped your car around a pole. It's usually when you're doing one of those foxhole prayers and you're asking God to please let your heart rate stop, or the boom, 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 the heartbeat in your ears because you're about to have a fucking heart attack. It's usually in those situations when you realize, I just might have a problem. That doesn't mean you're going to get help. That's not the question. The question was, when did you realize? I realized when I was willing to sacrifice something that I gave life to, something that I actually brought into this world and was left to my care and concern. It was my responsibility, granted by God, because there are a lot of women that wish they could have children that can't. And here I was. To an outsider, it can very much seem as if the drug or the alcohol was more important than my family. I'm going to pause there. Okay? I'm going to pause there. I just recently did 4 months of treatment. I went in on May 7th. I felt like I needed an additional 30 days. Actually, they only gave me 28 additional days. I ran out of time at that facility, so I did go to another facility immediately after I was discharged from the first one. I cannot tell you how many therapy classes, and they're not classes, because a class is where you learn something. These are just venting sessions that you really aren't getting anything out of, because depending on the phase or the level that addict or alcoholic is at, they either A, have not fully accepted their responsibility or what part they played in their addictions or alcoholism, or they don't have enough time for their thoughts to be centered enough to retain, process, or respond to the information they're receiving. I never got anything out of those classes because I always felt like it should have been like broken up. There should have been people who had more than 30 days clean time, then the newcomer, because I'm in a different place. I don't want to sit next to somebody tweaking out because they're 4 days off of meth. I done went through that. I don't need no reminders. I don't need no cosigners on, how good the drug felt. Because when you're at that level, you're still feeling the chemical response in some ways, whether it's mental or physical. I never got anything out of it. But I say that to say, it's in these classes that these moms who, example, I'm not even going to ruin it. We were in this class where you basically had to go down a pyramid and you just write down how things escalated for you throughout your addiction. And I believe the bottom of the pyramid is where things were like the heaviest.